Hey everyone, and welcome to Morning Chalk Up. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. On today's show, we have Wilson Pock. He's the general manager of 12 Labors CrossFit and the event director of not just one, but also two semifinals, the Mid Atlantic CrossFit Challenge, and now also Syndicate Crown. How's it going, Wilson? It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, you must be pretty busy.
I'm surprised we got him on.
I know we could find some time for this.
There's a lot of excitement on our team, and I want to make sure that I carve out the time to make sure that this event gets taken care of, just like the MAC.
Yeah, and there's a lot of excitement revolving around it, especially now that we know all of the semifinals events. But let's just kind of start with, what brought this on? How did you develop the Syndicate Crown?
Oh, well, it wasn't, it was a pretty quick turnaround. It's been very new to us. And just recently, the CrossFit Games team reached out to us and proposed whether or not we could pull off another semifinal. And we went back and forth to figure out what the best plan would be. And for our situation, we thought it was best to be able to stay in an area that we thought would be optimistic to run a live event. And that was going to be back-to-back weekends in Knoxville, Tennessee.
How long have some of those conversations been going on?
Pretty recent, I would say within the last week, not even 2 weeks. Yeah, it's been pretty quick. And we just are making sure that we're adaptable to a lot of the new things coming on the horizon. And we actually got really lucky because we were in Knoxville, Tennessee last weekend for a site visit that was actually planned for the MAC. And so I took 12 of us out there from our team to really do a deeper look to make sure that all the departments were taken care of. And it just worked out.
Was there any hesitation when CrossFit approached you for the second semifinal event to take on?
Oh, absolutely. I went back to my team, and there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are really orchestrating a lot of this stuff together, and they're the gears that are really making sure that the machine is moving in the right direction. And so I had to kind of get consensus of the whole group. I didn't want to make that decision on behalf of everyone, and a lot of them are the coaches and members of the 12 Laborers CrossFit community. And that consensus seemed like there was a lot of excitement behind it. And to ask over a dozen people, if not closer to 30 of a smaller group to commit to 2 full weekends when most of them have full-time jobs, that's probably the main driver why we accepted that proposal.
I think that's really important for people to hear that too, because it's been a few weeks since the initial semifinals are announced, and here we're talking to you after the announcement of the final two, and you say it's been a week to 10 days maybe since this became a possibility. And a lot of people are looking at now the structure of the season and wondering, well, why is everything on the East Coast in North America, and why is there someone that's hosting 2 semifinals? But the probable reality for CrossFit is that there's not a lot of people who are capable of running one of these things, especially in such a short time domain. So I think that it's a little bit creative, but also like an indicator of the reality of the situation for them is there weren't a ton of options here, and the fact that you guys are able to take this on in such short notice is something I think that should be commended and celebrated, especially when you say that about how many people are committing so much time to it.
Yeah, Brian, I think if there's an ounce of behind the curtain of an event organizer and understanding venue acquisition and working with the city and negotiating with the venue, we're talking a couple months. This process for just this year, I visited Knoxville a couple months ago just for the MAC specifically, and the hotel arrangements and the deals there, and working with the mayor or the venue manager. There's a lot of parties that are making sure that weekend is solidified from all aspects, and so it's not as quick as it sounds to just pick a venue and have a date. There's a lot more discussions to be had to make sure that the finances of the event allow it to be successful.
And I'm sure having both the MAC and Syndicate at the same venue one weekend after another, it makes it easier on both your team and the events team. But for the fan base and the athletes, how are you guys going to make sure that those 2 semifinals really stand out and are standalone?
That's a great question, Lauren. I think first and foremost, we're changing venues to the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. And once again, we're changing venues for now the 4th time in 4 years. And I haven't had the same blueprint, but we've had really great team members to support blueprint and the architectural drawings. But I would say the intimate feel of that arena, there's about 5,000 to 6,000 seats. That's probably the perfect size of the amount of spectators coming in for the event versus where we were last year. Thompson Boling Arena was great, but that fits 25,000+ people, and you kind of get drowned out. So the comparison that I would give is being in a CrossFit class with a smaller gym with a lot of people on a Saturday morning, and that energy is what we're going to try to replicate with a venue where you're looking down. As you know, that the hockey floor is below the first row, between 8 and 12 feet. And so the athletes are going to get a phenomenal experience looking up into these stands, and it's going to be super loud for sure.
Actually, it sounds very similar to the venue that West Coast had last year, which was similar in size and kind of layout, which was a great venue for that. So that's really good to hear.
Hey, Wilson, you talked about, you've been around MAC. This is your 6th year being with, I guess, 12 Labors and involved in the MAC. And you said there's a bunch of people that have been around before that, including Luke, who's the founder of 12 Labors. And actually his first gym was Syndicate, correct?
Yeah. So 2012, Luke and his business partner opened CrossFit Syndicate. They went to the games for 2 years. And it wasn't until 2014 where they changed the name to 12 Labors CrossFit. And so there's a lot of history with that name, that logo, that skull guy that you saw. It was the same logo that he used back in 2012. And all we did was change out the black hat with a crown and tilted it to the side. So there's a lot of history there. Surprisingly enough, there's probably close to 10 to 12 people who are in our internal team that were part of the founding members back when CrossFit Syndicate was founded. So like our architect, our co-owners, a lot of our coaches, they're still around from that early days prior to 12 Labors. And I think that just shows you the consistency of almost a decade of people who are behind the scenes. And I've only been with the event for about 6 years. And so there's a lot of people even before me that are still with the event who take just as much pride, if not more, than myself as the event director.
Lauren briefly mentioned maybe some of the challenges in terms of separating the two events, especially on back-to-back weekends. Can you maybe dive into a little bit, maybe not so much you, but maybe what Luke has to, I don't know who does the programming but who's going to be doing the programming for both events, but how big of a task is that, knowing that you have to, one, program for 2 events and second, make sure that there are different types of programming, but still testing the same things to find the fittest to send off the games.
Great question, Patrick. I think there's some things like scoring and broadcasts and certain aspects of signage that we're going to keep very, very consistent to make sure that it looks very, very professional. And there's going to be a lot of staff members within departments that are going to be there for both weekends. I joke around that we're going to be living in a hotel for a couple of weeks straight. But I think that consistency is what's going to deliver a phenomenal and quality event. In regards to programming, yes, absolutely honest. It's going to be a challenge on our team to make sure that they each have their own flavor and character. But we've been doing this a really long time, and there's like 4 of us that work together, Luke being the visionary behind the programming. And, whether it's programming for the affiliate, programming for 5 of the local events that we run throughout the year, and then now 2 semifinals, the running theme is that we get a lot of reps in, whether you're, signing in an athlete for 150 in-house competition or a festival that we just ran in November for 400 athletes in Maryland. So we've been just very fortunate to have people with a lot of experience. And I think the ownership of the blend of 12 Labors and now the Syndicate Crown and the Mid Atlantic CrossFit Challenge and then the festival component, it really just all blends in together.
Yeah.
What is that collaboration like between, the 12 Labors affiliate and then, running these 2 semifinals?
Oh, it's so hard the lines cross so much. I think every interview that I do, I wear a 12 Labor shirt because I don't really have the event shirts, to be honest. And even in our season, you don't know if there is going to be an event the following year, right? So I think this consistency and us to be a part of that, we take that responsibility very, very seriously. We do agree with the majority in that we want consistency for the sport and for the athletes and for CrossFit, from an affiliate perspective. So we believe that we can meet that mark, and we wouldn't have accepted that proposal if we didn't think we could over deliver on that proposal.
Wilson, you're obviously this year CrossFit's going to be programming 2 of those workouts. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, does that make things a little bit easier for you? I mean, that's 2 less events you have to worry about programming. I mean, did CrossFit put a cap on how many events you can have during the weekend for any one of those events? Talk on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I was running one event, definitely a little bit easier, I guess you would say, but with 2, definitely a challenge. But I think we have the right team and the ability to test those workouts to make sure that we fit the parameters that CrossFit wants to uphold.
Mm-hmm.
I think from CrossFit perspective, to standardize as much as they can while giving creativity to the event organizers, it is going to be challenging, but I think the event organizers need to rise to that challenge to be able to deliver that. And obviously that's not just in the US, but across the world.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I don't know if everyone always necessarily realizes this, but it's not just 2 sets of programming, but it's 2 sets of programming for 2 divisions, because there's also team competitions at both. And 12 Labors and going back to the Syndicate days obviously have a lot of team experience and programming experience, and presumably with teams from all the events you guys run. How much of an advantage is that for you guys to have people that have not just experience programming, but also for teams? Because I feel like a lot of times the perception is that the teams get forgotten.
Yeah, we've been a team competition for 8 years before we added the individual division during the sanctional days back in 2019. And so that is kind of like the lifeblood of the way that we program. But at the same time, programming has evolved just like the event industry has evolved within the space of CrossFit. So we have Luke, Josh, Jeff, and myself who are on the programming team. And luckily, those 3 are fit enough to be able to test a lot of these things. I could probably do an RX version and give them a standard time, maybe with the transitions between barbell movements or something like that. But we just have really good people who are so invested in what they do that they're testing, retesting, and then getting someone else to QC them again.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of laugh about it, but having access to people that are actually capable of testing the workouts is so critical, because the last thing that you want to happen is you program something and then no one finishes it, or everyone's finishing in 2 rounds when you're expecting 4 or whatever it is. So it is, I know from working with you guys in the past and watching the stuff you put on, it's a huge kind of advantage that you guys have in terms of the programming game.
Yeah, I would say between the 3 of those guys, taking me out of the equation, probably had over 12 years of games experience alone, just as team athletes, or definitely regional experience on top of that. So I think we're very fortunate. I don't think it's a requirement, but I think with them being athletes in the space, going to regionals back, at the Atlantic Georgia World Congress Center, Palm City, and going to the games, back at the tennis stadium, and there's just so much history and experience from their end that that's how we're able to elevate that athlete experience.
Wilson, you after last year, you've been a busy person. I mean, just because you not only did you do your own semifinal, but you were at Granite Games as a fan, rooting on your 12 Labors. But then you're also behind the scenes at the games, and you're also behind the scenes at Wodapalooza. What have you learned from all those experiences? Have you taken what you learned, and maybe that's why you're more well prepared this year to have 2 semifinals?
I would say that the event space is so small. We all want it to succeed. And so if I can just do my part with whether it's the games and helping them out on the competition side or working Wodapalooza, we understand that it takes so many people to deliver such a quality product. And I just kind of know my lane for those events and just really deliver on those things, because we used to wear so many hats just behind the scenes that if I can just wear one, I'm confident that I can really meet that expectation. At the same time, going back to that point, finding really qualified people is one thing, but with the passion and the care on top of that, that's the differentiating factor. And I think that's the difference with our staff is, I say this time and time again, most of them from the behind the curtain, outside of, let's just say, judging or scoring or a more specialized role, they don't work the games. They've never worked regionals. They've never worked anything outside of the MAC, but they care for it just like the gym that they go to. And I think that ownership is something that you cannot put on an application on a volunteer form. And so these are people that I see every day in the affiliate. I coach classes still. And so I think there's so many more touch points that we're able to make sure that things are checked off and done correctly. And as much as last weekend for our department leads, it was a work trip. It was actually, 80% socializing with one another. And I think that's one of those things where I joked around with our staff that it took me to buy tickets for 12 people to go out of state to hang out in the same room. And I think that's the type of thing that we realize, that we're all so busy with our lives that it's hard to all get on the same page.
And I know you're talking about the behind the scenes people, but the other group that you mentioned, the judges, the scoring team, everything that goes into that is something that you guys also have years and years of relationships with those entities. I'm sure that makes it possible to put on something like this in a short time frame. I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. And those specialized departments, I mean, even as of right now, I can genuinely tell you that I have coverage in both weekends back to back, and that consistency is something that you cannot put a price tag on. It's so great the resonating theme that I'm getting with a lot of these individuals who are giving up their time and their energy, their PTO, is that they're going to have so much fun. And I said this to you earlier, Brian, I think a lot of events, it's a lot of work, and that could be the forefront of your mind. But I think with the first response being, I can't wait to have so much fun at these events, I think it's very encouraging for me to hear from a lot of people who've accepted their positions already.
And I think for anyone who's listening, like, you got to listen to what we're talking about here. There's so much that goes into running these events, and it's easy to sit back and be critical of CrossFit for having someone run two or in the same geographical location or whatever. But given the time frame and the recent changes in the landscape of competitive CrossFit in the last couple of weeks, this is about as good as it was going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, for future years, like, I don't know what that's going to look like. There is a possibility that we can always hopefully relocate maybe one of the events, but we're not looking that far ahead, because this year is so pivotal and really making sure that we send the right people to the CrossFit Games. And so I think with enough lead time and the venue acquisition that I talked about earlier, that could happen. But at the same time, I'll give you an answer right now that I would have to approach each individual department head before I make that answer. I can't make that decision for our team. And so knowing that, we would have to fly to a different venue or a different state and maybe able to turn that around within a week or two, it's a huge ask. And everything that we've done, like, the thing has been very, very organic. And I said this earlier on another podcast, but I like to still think that we are in the infancy stage of being an event organizer in this space. I know that sounds kind of like left field, but with so many changes in the landscape of CrossFit as a sport and as a methodology, I think we're trying to just meet that mark and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Well, you talk about, adapting. It seems like, again, every year something's new, and you guys have adapted with that. And that says a lot about your base, your community, and people that head up that department. So, I'd like to say you're doing a great job of it. So if anyone criticizes you about that, they need to step back and, like Brian says, kind of look at the overall picture, what the big task that you've had to undertake here.
Well, and especially with all of the experience that you have, it's not like they just gave anybody a semifinal event. You're somebody with experience who, as you mentioned, you have a huge team of people who can prepare for this and even test the workouts. Looking back at the end of the season, what is the ultimate goal? How will you know that you accomplished that?
I think from my perspective, there's going to be like three key metrics. I think one is making sure that the athletes are definitely taken care of in addition to the volunteer staff. I think none of this continues, right? All the events are really dependent on the village of people behind the scenes. I think that's kind of metric number one for me. I think number two is the ability to produce a really great broadcast. There's more people watching from behind the screen than there is going to be on site. And so hopefully more people are drawn into the sport of CrossFit, more people are drawn into the affiliate. With 12 Labors having 2 locations in itself, I think this is a big ecosystem. And third, to be completely honest, I think the 20 plus people who are in our inner circle of our staff, making sure that they have the best experience, because if they're not in a position where they had 2 great weekends back to back, none of this is really possible. And I think those are the 3 big mantras that I'm going to have to really live up to make sure that those boxes are checked outside of anything else.
Well, Wilson, it was so great to have you here, letting us know some of the details as we recently released the final semifinals. You now will be doing 2, MAC and Syndicate Crown. We're so excited, and we can't wait to see what comes out of it. The season is just about to start.
Thanks a lot.